What's up, everybody? Welcome to the For Your Mental Health podcast, episode number 28. And I know it's been a little bit since I've uploaded, but, that's life. It's living my life, figuring things out, just living it, like we all are. So, it's nice to find a good place in my head, a good place in my heart to go and upload a new episode. So, feels good to do that for sure. So thank you for tuning in. Episode 28 of the For Your Mental Health podcast. I want to deliver a message of hope because I think it's needed. I think a lot of us struggle with so much in our daily lives, and you kind of forget that, beyond the surface layer of business transactions and bus routes and paychecks and getting groceries and taking a walk, there's so much on the inside that we all, are handling in the best ways we can, dealing with different issues with our family, with our society in general, with ourselves. So this is a message of hope. And I think it comes from just, taking every day and just living it and really being grateful for that. I think the rough spots that we face can be really rough sometimes, but there's that through line through all of it, where I think if you are moving towards something, if you are focused on what brings you joy and what gets you through the day, it could be something small, like getting some ice cream or having a conversation with someone that you've never met. Those are important things for sure. So, I'm reading a book recently, right here, Rent by Jonathan Larson. It's sort of like an autobiographical, look at his life and the story of how the musical Rent came along, which I'm a huge fan of Rent. So, that's very meaningful to me. I found that book at the thrift store for $3, and now it's mine forever. So I think that's pretty cool. But a lesson to be learned from Jonathan Larson and Rent is that to be hopeful, to be passionate about something, like Jonathan Larson was in writing Rent, a musical that he worked on for, I think 7 years. And he passed away before it ever hit Broadway. So a lot of the accolades came much later, posthumously for him. And it's a hopeful message from that musical and from, I think, me, that that life can be a real joy, if you let it, if you make yourself available for good things to happen, So having a positive mindset, having an outlook that isn't all doom and gloom is really beneficial, for sure. So yeah, I think, today it is, sometimes difficult to find that positive mindset because of, so many things happening in the world today. It's hard. It really is. And for me, I've always been an optimist. I've always been someone that's tried to have a positive outlook on life, a positive attitude. It just makes everything go down so much smoother, in your everyday life, whether it's interactions with roommates, friends, family, people on the street, just having a positive attitude just really makes everything work so much more effectively in the world. I think everyone can benefit from that, from that, the hope that there's going to be, better times to come, Some may call it naive, others a brave way to be, because It's not something everyone's courageous enough to do. You know, it's easy to fall into the trap of being negative and jaded and not wanting to, be your best self, or at least a self that you're happy with. So looking at something like Rent and Jonathan Larson, and seeing his creative vision, and while he didn't live to see it all the way through to what it became, which was a worldwide phenomenon, he did have a vision. He did have hopefulness. He did have something inside of him that he needed to express, as an artist, but also as a person that saw the life around him in New York City, in those different boroughs, and the different types of people, the different things they were dealing with in the 90s. That was something that was really, really powerful. It really had a great impact upon his art and on who he was in his life. And so, I look around today, in Chicago, late May here, it's getting a little warm, getting a little sweaty. um, but, in the everyday, I ride the bus a lot. I walk a lot. I see a lot of different people every single day. Just traveling around the suburbs, the city, you get a real sense of the people around you, the society around you. And, my thought is that I think people are, going through a lot, financially, emotionally, just in their everyday lives. But I think everyone has the capacity to be hopeful, to be positive about the future, even though it doesn't always look that way. I had a kind of a cool moment the other day when I was at the park playing basketball with my friend, and there was this one kid that came up to me and my friend. We were actually playing baseball at the time, but we had our basketballs still out by the fence. And they're like, "Hey, are those your basketballs?" And we were like, "Yeah." And they were like, "Well, can we use them? Can we play with them?" And you know, I asked my friend what they thought. They're like, "Yeah, we'll be here for 5-10 minutes. Sure, why not?" And and so they were playing with our basketballs, and after we were done, I thought to myself, well, these kids literally don't have a basketball to play with. Like, they had to borrow ours. Um, and so I was like, you know, what if I just gave it to them? What if I just gave them my basketball? I'll buy a new one, whatever. It wasn't like super expensive or anything. Um, and and that was cool. That was cool, to help in that way. Just something small. Um, I thought was was a step in the right direction. It's like if more of us did things like that, like just give a kid your basketball, they don't have one at the park. Just being generous with your time or your money, or with your passions, with your focus. I think those things really do make a difference in the world. So, you know, those kids really really loved that moment. I was leaving on my bike, and I saw the kid shooting the basketball, which used to be mine. That used to be my ball, but now it's theirs. And it was it was cool for me to see that, because, like, you know I think in the past I've benefited from people being generous to me, and so the fact that I was able to give back like that, I thought was really cool. To see that kid, being happy playing basketball, just like I like to play basketball. And now they got a ball. Now they got a ball they can play with. So that was cool. That was cool to see that. That I could make that little difference with just that tiny little gesture. So, um, yeah, yeah, hopefulness. Doing a little part. In your life, whatever it is. You live your life. You see the people around you. You know how you can help. I would encourage you to do so. Even if it's just for like a small little moment, seemingly, to you, but to the other person, like the kid playing basketball. Now he's got a ball. Now he can play. Now he can go and shoot hoops whenever he wants. Maybe he couldn't do that before. So, you know, having that impact on people's lives, I think makes that hope a reality. Takes the hope, the sort of concept of a better future, and actually applies it to the world and makes it a better future by making those simple changes. So, yeah, that's pretty powerful, I think. So that's my message of hope. That's my message that, sometimes it looks like things are really bleak and that there's not a lot of good left in the world. But, I think just like Jonathan Larson did in Rent, he put so much effort, so much passion into his work, into his art, into making a musical that really resonated with the people around him in New York City in the 90s, that eventually resonated to the entire world. I think, us today in 2026 can, do our part, our little part in our own lives every day to bring that hope up to reality, to make the hope into action, to turn that action into positive change. And I definitely think that's a world where we can create together. So, that is episode number 28 of the For Your Mental Health podcast. And I feel like it's been a hopeful one, one that hopefully will give you a better outlook on your mental health going forward. That, hey, maybe things aren't so bad, and maybe you could do something in your own life to help others or to help yourself feel more of that hope and more of that positivity billowing out into the rest of the world. So much love, y'all. Mwah. Until next time, see you later. Bye for now.